who has worked for 25 years in the police, but in the last 14 years, she's been working in human exploitation and sex trafficking. And since her retirement, she started a Chance for Awareness, which is an organization that wants to continue to educate on awareness about sex trafficking and human trafficking as well. And I'm very excited to speak to Heidi today so we can become more aware of what's happening out there, which is something that it's so easy to just close our eyes with. And we're just talking a little bit off camera about it. But hi, Heidi, how are you?
Doing good.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for taking your time. So why don't you just tell us a little bit more about, what led you to start a Chance for Awareness, of course, your experience, but a little bit more about like why you're so passionate about this.
Yeah. So I guess from the beginning, from patrol to school resource officer, that's kind of when I sparked an interest into the world of sex trafficking. And it was because of a juvenile that I had contacted at the police station that I knew from when she was in 7th and 8th grade. And she basically told me that she was in trouble for prostitution. And I had already been in law enforcement as an officer for 6, 7, 8 years by then. And here's this young kid, and it didn't even connect in my head until that moment that young people get involved in this situation. And so that's when I really started looking into the specific bureau within the police department that works that particular crime. Now, when I first started with the bureau and I tested and got the position, we were focused solely on arresting prostitutes. Mm-hmm. And I think my perspective comes from this unique situation where I evolved as the problem evolved. Mm-hmm. During that last 14 years of my career, because initially we were not asking the question we should have been asking, which is, what can we do to get you out of the life? What can we do to help you? And instead we were arresting prostitutes, and we were doing exactly what their pimps were telling them the cops are going to do, is arrest them. And so no wonder they weren't coming forward. And so we have a huge many years of this behavior going on to repair the relationships with victims and actually get them to trust us enough to come out of the life, get rescued, be offered services, and actually help these people that we claim to want to help people. Yeah. And actually do it. So, and then I've seen that focus change, obviously, from on prostitution and the prostitutes to focusing and targeting in on sex buyers and traffickers, which I referred to them as a pimp earlier. They're one and the same. That's just two different words to refer for the same suspect, the same bad guy is a pimp or a trafficker. And so I've really seen that evolution of law enforcement's understanding as the problem has evolved, as the community awareness has evolved. And so that's what caused me when I left, because I'm still very passionate about what I was doing. I am very passionate about sharing all of my experience as an undercover and my unique perspective as a female undercover working this problem, getting solicited by buyers, having traffickers try and recruit and groom me. And so I have a lived experience as an undercover with this world. And I also have the pleasure of and the experience of putting these bad guys in jail for hundreds of years. And so sharing that with law enforcement is one part of what I'm doing since I've retired and my business here with A Chance for Awareness. And then the other part of that is the community awareness, because we're in a unique situation right now, especially with movies like Sound of Freedom coming out, where people are actually thinking about human trafficking. It's actually kind of in the forefront of their mind right now. And it's a very critical time to continue that awareness, share information to the community about how this happens to vulnerable people, and how, they can do things. They can actually do things to get involved in joining the fight, besides being vigilantes and trying to do undercover operations.
Yeah. I mean, that is such an important work. I mean, I take my kids to the church, and my pastor has a project in the Philippines where they rescue young girls as young as 9 or 10 from the sex trafficking. And my kids have seen the videos, and and trying to explain to my kids something that it's so far off their kind of comfort zone and even awareness or understanding. it has been a real challenge, like my daughter is 9, my son is 11, like why would they do this? Like, why would the guys want to have sex with the young girls? Why would the, young girl, why would their family give them to the sex trafficking? All of those questions like that. And you mentioned something like the people that are vulnerable. So am I right to think that the people that get into, into the prostitution or into that world, are they necessarily only people that are vulnerable? How does that work? How do you see that?
Yeah. So when I say vulnerable and I'm talking about a certain type of victim, there is a misunderstanding that it's only the poor kids or only the kids in child welfare or only the kids that live in a poor neighborhood. And I have had, kids that their parents were nurses and doctors. They had a full ride scholarship and they fell into the life. I have one case that involves a lady who was in her 40s. She was a Department of Corrections officer working at the prison, lost her job, got heavy into drugs, and then met her trafficker in her 40s. It is not one socioeconomic demographic. It isn't one race. It isn't one age. Literally, it's anyone who traffickers are seeing are vulnerable in the sense of lack of family support, lack of self-esteem, lack of employment, maybe elements of depression going on, elements of, disability sometimes going on also. And then, of course, youth are right for the picking. And the other part of that is the demand for youth is coming from the sex buyers wanting younger and younger youth, younger and younger victims. So that's where that's coming from.
And have you seen like also a massive change with the online world, right? I know that, the online world, like not only, there is websites that people can just go in and, just take their clothes off and there's money getting wired to them. And I was talking to a friend of mine who her friend is a police officer, and here in Australia, and the parents went to the police station saying like, my daughter's coming home with all these like Gucci bags and all this stuff that is really expensive. We don't have any money to buy her that. She's not earning any money to get there. Like, where is she getting this from? And the police officer saying, well, has she been on this website? And they're like, no. And again, this is not people that are like really low socioeconomic, kind of in that segment, but it's just just normal people trying to understand what's going on there in their children's life. Like, how are you seeing that kind of shift as well?
Yeah, so the internet facilitates a lot of this problem, be it just the sheer ability for traffickers to reach anonymously hundreds of people a day. And what I want people to understand is that a trafficker's job all day long is managing the victims they have and seeking out new ones. They don't have a job like we do, maybe going to work, coming home, regular hours, consistent hours, a paycheck, salary, any of that. They have none of that. All of what they're doing is illegal activity. And they do it very well, and they're very skilled at manipulating and seeking out these vulnerable people. And the internet really creates an element where they can basically send out, copy and paste, send out the same message to hundreds of profiles an hour, all on different platforms, and see who takes the bait. And that is really concerning. That's where I refer to the phone as the new, not the new, but like the white van that parents are expecting to come into their lives and abduct their child based off of myths of, stories you heard as a child from your parents. None of that's accurate. What's really happening is your phone is the new white van, and your phone is what gives the trafficker open access to your child, especially if you aren't involved in their life. You don't set expectations and rules for them, or you don't use tools like some of these phones that are developed by companies that are concerned with keeping children protected, like Bark Technologies or Gab Wireless. And so if parents aren't involved in their child's life and taking these steps, it's going to be a no wonder that things happen to them. I'm sorry. That's going to be the truth of it. We can't do it all ourselves.
No.
We need parents to be involved and parents to bring up their children with this expectation of there are people out there that are trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
There are people out there that will suggest that you don't talk to me as your parent. And anytime that's happening, have these conversations ahead of this happening. Anytime that's happening, this is what I want you to do. And I want you to recognize their intentions.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like we have already had those conversations with my kids, and it's so crazy because, you know, my son once said to me, but why would they want to do that? They, you know, they won't want to do that, you know, and it's kind of trying to explain to them, yes, they will want to do that, you know, because of course they're still so innocent, and they just don't understand that, you know, there is people out there, especially if they're coming from a normal family unit, you know, that they are just not mentally well, you know, like so you mentioned that the phone companies, you said that have an invested interest in protecting children. Like, what do you mean by that?
So there are two that I know of specifically, Bark Technologies and Gab Wireless. And I have a discount code through them also if you put in code 𝗕𝗢𝗪𝗓 for awareness. But basically those two companies have made phones that look like an iPhone with a touch screen. And they made these phones where if a predator is trying to engage with your child, it will send a message to the parent, hey, someone's asking you know, inappropriate messages or trying to ask for an image or encouraging them to share an image or all of those things. And so that automatically tells the parent, this is happening.
Yeah.
You know, not to completely depend on your child not to come forward also, but at least you're getting a heads up and you can stop it right then.
Yeah.
Before they ever even encourage your child to, you know, delete these messages between us. This is a secret. Your mom wouldn't understand, those kind of things before that ever even happens.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. And they also have like the Apple Watches that looks like an Apple Watch. You know, if you want to get your kid just this and you're not ready to get them a phone necessarily. Yeah. It's really wonderful. And then they have blogs and they talk about all these new apps. Like some of these schools have apps now that they want the kids to enroll in, like Saturn app, and they want them to, you know, communicate with their fellow students on this app. Well, child predators can also log in on those apps, and they have. So, you know, they are up on and up to date on sharing information to parents about these things that are coming up. As technology advances, parents are being informed, which is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So the trainings that you provide, do you go into schools as well, like talking to the kids about it, or is it just more at the parent level?
So as an undercover in all of those years that I was working, I was not in the schools. I would present to the administration, the school security, the counselor, the nurse, those kind of people, but I wasn't present in the classrooms. There are non-governmental organizations out there, at least here in the United States, that I'm aware of that actually are more relatable than a detective coming in, you know, younger generation, you know, they're super relatable to the students and they do a great job. One of them is called Red Light Rebellion. They're here locally in Arizona. There's multiple, and that's really also helpful because law enforcement, I mean, I have the job of, you know, going after the bad guys, working as an undercover, investigating big cases that come in, complaints from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, those kind of things. So having someone else take on that role is really helpful.
Yeah. So the trainings that you do with the civilians that you mentioned, like what do you think like each person could be doing as, you know, kind of a normal civilian that, you know, could contribute to better this, you know, this issue, which I think it's probably so big now that, you know, we need to start taking more responsibility, like you're saying, on the awareness, but also doing something about it, right?
Yeah. So on my website, I have a whole list of sex trafficking indicators. And I bring that up because knowing more about sex trafficking and being able to recognize it possibly happening with someone you may know is one of the things that I would suggest you do to take steps to get involved in protecting your own kids and then also changing the atmosphere of your community around you. And so, recognizing those indicators. I have built a whole online course that people can take digitally. It's a pre-recorded course. You can take it at your leisure. There's a certificate at the end when you complete it. But it is my Power of Awareness course, and I talk through all of in great detail all of the things that we've alluded to here as far as victim vulnerability, sex buyers and their role, traffickers, how they recruit and groom. And so learning about sex trafficking in general is definitely one of the things I would suggest. Secondly, I would suggest, once you recognize those indicators and be able to see that happening with someone, if you see something, say something, report it. We have gone completely the other direction with not getting involved, breaking out our phone only to put it on Instagram or TikTok instead of actually making a call to the police if we're right in front of something happening. I've had many victims come forward saying they're getting beat up in broad daylight at a bus stop, for example. 15 people are waiting for the bus, cars are driving by, and no one's doing anything to help this person, even lifting a finger to call the police. Wow. And so that's like a whole other thing. We need to stop that behavior. We need to raise our kids to be aware and know who and how to call and see another person's safety more important than TikTok. And those kind of things. Wow. So as far as other things people can do to get involved, I would say, a lot of times when we've rescued a victim, the property that they are concerned with and thinking about in the back of their mind when I'm interviewing them is their makeup, a purse they just got at the 𝗕𝗢𝗦𝗧 store, a pair of high heels. They have nothing else. So the little bit of property that the trafficker allows them to have, they're super worried about it. So I conclude my interview, for instance, and they ask me, so when can we go get my stuff? Now, being able to replace those things for a victim is huge. So I encourage people to create a drive for human trafficking, to have people donate items. We need toothbrush, toothpaste, hairbrush, hair comb, a hair scrunchie, leggings, flip-flops in different sizes and leggings in different sizes, undergarments. Because when I intercept these people, the only thing they have is the pimp's phone that they gave them and the clothes on their back, and they're not even wearing undergarments a lot of times. So being able to give them property of their own to replace what they, really are holding on to, but unnecessarily is huge in, really.
They have nothing, right? They have nothing. That's all they have, right? Especially how many years they've been there. So that's the only thing that they have that it's there, is that it's in their control, and you don't realize how much trauma they've been through.
For sure. So like a backpack of this is size small leggings and a small hoodie and this size shoe, flip-flop, and another one this size and another one that size. And then we could just hand them the whole backpack, maybe a gift card to McDonald's or whatever in there, so that they can have, choice. The choice, the ownership of their own things, all of those things have been stripped away from them. And so being able to give that back to them little by little and almost immediately after a rescue is huge.
So what happened after the rescue? Like, you just rescue them and you go, okay, well, if they do have a family, even though if it's a dysfunctional family, would they go back to the family? Like, what happens?
So very, very many different scenarios. If they're in child welfare, we have a whole protocol where we've established that it is no longer safe or appropriate to call child welfare, have them go to a random group home that has an available bed, because we found that they just go in one door and out the other, and then they take another kid with them and introduce them to their trafficker. So then we've, caused other victims to be involved. So instead of that, our protocol is, it's basically a cooperation between law enforcement, the Department of Child Safety, which is CPS, 𝗓𝗡𝗎𝗄𝗡, which happens to be the particular insurance company that pays for kids in child welfare in this area, and then a behavioral health hospital or the children's hospital, depending on their circumstances. So what happens is the whole situation starts with the rescue. I got to go bust down doors and get the bad guy. I'm going to transport this child to the hospital. They get checked out It's getting paid for by 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗧. They get shower, they get to sleep, they get, safe. And it's a 23-hour hold. So they're held there, which keeps them in a safe place. They can't run away. They're getting help, whether they want it or not. And then after 23 hours later, even if that's 2:00 in the morning, myself or another detective will come in from home to transport the child safely to the appropriate placement. And in that 23 hours, Department of Child Safety has more time to find a bed at an appropriate placement instead of a random group home, where they can go to an actual placement that has things put in place like therapy, counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, all of those things. And this is a placement that's specific for juvenile sex trafficking victims. So that's the juvenile side. And since we've developed that whole protocol, it's really significantly affected kids linking back up with their trafficker, because their trafficker dips out and leaves because they're like, is she telling the police anything about me? I better go. You know what I mean? But it also helps the kids actually get help, come down off of whatever they're on, get medical attention, rest, get, some assistance, and they're more likely to not run away from placement.
And feel safe.
That's the juvenile side. Now, as far as adults, we do have relationships with shelters that are specific to sex trafficking victims as well. It is a program that they have to voluntarily agree to give up their phone for a period of time, because the shelter has more people to keep safe, and they don't want, this rescued person to all of a sudden be wanting to talk to their pimp, and then they tell them where they're located, and then the pimp shows up at the shelter. So it has to be, it's a little bit more of a delicate, if anything could be more delicate than juveniles, adults are also very delicate to, actually remove from the life and make hard decisions not to return back to it. All the other dynamics of it is fast money. They don't have a lot of rules. They might be still in love with this person. They're seeking that relationship from somebody, and they got it at least from that person, even though it was I'm sure it was violent half the time or more than half the time. But it is a little bit more difficult to get an adult to actually get out of the life. And all the other dynamics of, do they have, children? Are there children in child welfare? Are they trying to locate their children? All the other dynamics. So definitely it takes a team. It can't be just law enforcement. We need assistance with all kinds of things. We need victim survivor advocates, like actual survivors out of the life that can come back and help explain and show and relate to victims, both adults and juveniles, to keep them understanding this other situation that goes on here, where, and I'm not sure how long it takes for something go through the court system there, but it could take 1, 2, 3, 5 years from the point of rescue to trial or a plea. And victims don't want to stick around for all of that. And so that's the whole other hard part of my job specifically, is getting that victim justice. But if they keep having to show up to court and it gets continued, and show up to court and it gets continued, they're not going to want to play that game. And defense attorneys know that. And so those continuations almost are intentional sometimes. So it's a big mess.
Wow, it's a big mess. I mean, wow, there's so many things that you said that would you say that, from the juvenile point of view and the adult, does it become almost like a drug addiction, right? Like, because that's, you're addicted to like that, the fast money, the whatever, if it's not the person, but the lifestyle, or is it a brainwashing? What is it that keeps them, in that place?
So there's a lot of dynamics, and I can't speak for all survivors and put it in one little, this equals this. But I can tell you from my experience, and from also being recruited and groomed from a trafficker multiple times, they have this dream that they try to sell. And it's always kind of this dangling carrot of, we're going to do all these amazing things, but you got to do this first, and then we'll get there. And so they're believing that that's going to happen eventually. and they may give them little pieces or little bites off that carrot to show, like gifts or rewards of some kind, those kind of things. But also the other side of that is the threats and the manipulation, and that's why they stay in these situations. Because I try and explain, my ulterior motive for my awareness is also I've experienced a lot of trials, and I appreciate it when juries understand that this may be a situation where this person was freely walking down the side of the road with a phone in their hand, but I'm telling you they're a victim, and I'm telling you they're not free to leave and they're trapped. And it's a really special connection for the jury to actually recognize, hey, she's not wrong. She couldn't have left. And these are the reasons why. And so it's my motive to reach as many people, as many potential jurors as possible, to understand the dynamics and the ins and outs of sex trafficking. So in that way, if they are chosen as a juror, they'll have that back knowledge about sex trafficking to make an informed decision.
Yeah, yeah. Because, a person who has never lived through it or never experienced anything to do with it, like you said, it's so important that the victims go back to help, because they know exactly what goes on in their heads when they're inside that place and what they need to shift to get out of that, right? Otherwise, it's just so hard to explain to a person who has never been anywhere close to that place, right?
Yeah, and it's not something until recently with all these new documentaries that people were even thinking about or talking about. And so this is a great time. We should celebrate that, we have this opportunity to make as many people aware as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter, it was really interesting. My daughter asked me, she's 9, and she said, Mom, what's the easiest way to make money? And I was together with my son and my husband. And I just said to her, like, well, there is a couple of easy ways to make money. And one is selling drugs, but that's illegal. And the second one is to sell yourself as a prostitute, but that's also illegal. And you need to make a choice, because if the police catch you, you can go to prison. And not only that, you were doing something to harm other person. My husband looked at me and said, like, you can't say that, she's only 9. I said, well, she needs to understand that at some point in her life, somebody might offer her the opportunity to earn easy money, because it is, sounds like it is that carrot, isn't it? This is easy money. And it sounds easy, but it's not easy, right? And it was really, so she she's very mature, my daughter. She was kind of thinking about it. And I thought it was important to kind of explain to them what is out there, because they are never, until they come across, how are they going to know, right?
Yeah, that, and I would wonder, where is she getting this information about making money fast or easy? And is it influence from some social media account or influencer saying certain things? Because that's the other problem here, is these platforms, they're not checking to see if you are an adult or not. There's all kinds of influence over, being Instagram famous or whatever. And so it is understandable that a 9-year-old may have viewed something on social media or TikTok and said, wow, they're talking about making fast money. What's the way to make fast money? And it's definitely, harmful for these platforms to not guard, our youth and keep it, we used to, even rated R movies, you get that notification, back when I went to movies, you had to show your ID if you looked like you were underage to even go into a movie. Where did we move away from all of that? That's what also was helping to keep our generation safe. And so now we need to have parents more involved to keep the next generation safe.
Yeah. She's not allowed any social media, by the way, but I thought it was a really interesting question. I thought I better be honest, and but at some point I'm gonna have to allow her at some point, and I think having those conversations beforehand is really important, so they can really understand what goes on around the world that I might have not been exposed to, but they might have.
Yeah, definitely. Our generation never grew up with an entire computer in our hands. So we don't even know the outcome of, or the ramifications of, this entire generation coming through that has always had that at the tip of their fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. So what it is the one thing that you would like to leave people with, like, so they can really think about it, like parents like me, or, parents that are got teenager kids or even adult kids, civilians that are just kind of thinking. I think there is a mixed feeling. Like, once I know, I feel so helpless because I can't do anything. What is the one thing that you can empower ourselves to think and do?
Yeah, I think definitely back to the, see something going on, say something. Even if it's, this misunderstanding that if I call the police, a patrol car and a uniformed officer is going to come in front of my house, all the neighbors are going to see, somebody on Ring camera might talk about it. Where are the cops at somebody's house? We need to know that basically you can call the police and report something over the phone, tell them I don't want officers to come to the house, but I want to report it. Here's what I have. Or call these hotline numbers to provide information. I have a license plate. I took a picture of the person.
Mhm.
This is what they look like. Last seen leaving southbound. Whatever information you have, this is what 911 is for. This is what these hotlines are developed for. This is what these platforms where you can send in complaints are for. And so we need, parents to be inundating law enforcement with it, because otherwise we don't know what we don't know. And we're
Mhm.
not going to be able to find out the real bad guys and go after these predators until it's too late. So,
Yeah.
really being an informed person, knowing what the crime is, knowing about it, and then knowing how to report if you see it happening with someone.
So a lot of those people, they're also overseas, right? Like, so especially in the online world, like, what
Yes.
in the work that you did, I mean, there is not much you can do when people are overseas, right?
Not from my position in a local law enforcement agency.
Yeah.
My perspective is limited there. Obviously, I have had many, many foreigners, many incidents, involving, for example, Asian massage parlors or Mexican brothels. All of those things happen in the city that I worked. And that's where I would have, perspective to speak on how those things went. But definitely it is a different dynamic than what you would see on TV as far as our abilities to, you know, extradite a family to a safe house like you see on TV overnight, or those
Mhm.
kind of things aren't really reality. Just like if I do DNA evidence and I buccal swab somebody and I submit it to the lab, they're not calling me 20 minutes later having me come look at the results and all these people they positively identified. It just doesn't happen that way like you
Yeah.
see on TV.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time. I'm going to leave all your details, your website, so people can they can get
Yeah.
your course as well from the website, the list,
Uh-huh.
get in touch with you for training purposes. And yeah, I think thank you so much. And I think the work that you're doing
Yeah.
is very, very important. Thank you so much for
Yeah. So on the website, real quick before we close, I do have my sex trafficking indicators list, my tips for parents. I printed all these, and then my tips for teens. And if you text 333-777, the word awareness, just send that text. It'll prompt you to give your email address, and then those can be sent to you.
perfect.
Or you
And
can go to
is
the
that
website.
from America or from all over the world? Just in
Okay.
America.
No, no, no.
Oh,
That's all over.
oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So text 333-777 and the
Yes.
word awareness. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, and then my website too. I mean, I can email it from my website. If you go to my website and click on, get your tips for parents and teens, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝒐𝑎𝑛ceforawareness.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn under Heidi Chance, or I am also on Instagram, _chance_4_awareness.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I will add all of those links below so
Okay,
people don't have to memorize, and the telephone number as well. But again, thank you so much for your time.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.